First, though, we want to talk about reopening around the country and what that is going to mean, as well as other issues with our next guest. That is Representative Tom Malinowski, Democrat of New Jersey. Congressman, thank you for joining us. I do want to talk about China with you in just a moment. But first, since you're in New Jersey, I have to ask you about the lifting of the stay-at-home order there on the part of Governor Phil Murphy, and whether you are concerned about seeing any kind of resurgence in New Jersey like we have seen in other states like Texas and California.
I am concerned. I think we played it very, very carefully in New Jersey. We were the state that was per capita the hardest hit in the country. Governor Murphy, our state governor, took very decisive decisions to enforce a lockdown, to shut down the economy. And it worked. We've gotten our numbers way down in terms of daily cases, hospital admissions, transmission of coronavirus. We've gotten our testing numbers way up. We were the state a couple of months ago with the highest percentage of people being testing positive. We're now well below 10%. So, we're not where Texas and Arkansas and Georgia and Arizona are. We're ahead of the curve, and I think it is correct that we now gradually, cautiously begin to come out of this. But we got to be vigilant. We have to stay concerned.
Representative, when you say be vigilant and stay concerned, what do you say to your colleagues on the other side of the aisle who it's pandemic related, and we're seeing spikes in states that like Texas, but the federal government's financial response to all of this is falling along political lines, with conservatives saying we don't want to bail out allegedly, liberal states, and there's this animosity that's going on. So how do you close that gap so that people in Texas might get the federal funding they desperately need as the spike now goes there?
Yeah, well, I don't think the American people are divided on this question. There's a stupid debate in Washington, particularly in the United States Senate, where Mitch McConnell is still kind of saying that assistance to state and local governments is somehow a blue state bailout. That's just nonsense. Mayors, county officials, state legislators all across this country are facing exactly the same difficulties right now. Revenue is drying up because we locked down the economy. They all need help to be able to pay their local first responders, their firefighters, their police officers. You know who voted to defund the police? It was Republicans in the House and now the Senate who voted against the HEROES Act, which we passed in the House precisely to enable our state and local governments to pay for our heroes, including our police officers. That's got to change, not just for New Jersey, we desperately need it, but for Texas, for Kentucky, for Arkansas, for Illinois. All across this country, states are facing the same trouble.
Congressman, we could spend this whole interview talking about police and whether we should defund, but I do want to turn to China because you have been quite vocal and passionate on that issue, writing in a recent op-ed that we do need to be tough on China in terms of its human rights record, for example, but we need to do so by making more of a coalition with other nations. What do you think needs to happen for that to happen? And in other words, is a President Joe Biden, for example, someone who is going to follow that path?
Well, he said he would. And look, we have to be realistic that China does pose, under the rule of the Communist Party, under this regime, it does pose a big challenge to us. The Chinese Communist Party wants a world in which big countries can bully small countries, in which they can steal our commercial secrets, in which the rules on human rights and corruption don't apply to them, and they're trying to spread that way of thinking to other countries. So yeah, we got to be up to the challenge. But this is a great power, and if we want to do it effectively, we do need to be in coalition with allies. This is not rocket science. We have strong allies in Asia, for example, South Korea, Japan. The Trump administration, even as they posture trying to sound tough on China, is simultaneously threatening to pull our troops out of South Korea and Japan unless those countries basically pay us extortionate rates to keep our troops there. That makes Beijing very, very happy. We are, instead of fighting Chinese influence in the United Nations, at the World Health Organization, for example, we're just pulling out. We're just ceding the territory so that the Chinese can step in and have more influence.
Rick Newman.
Sure.
Sorry, Rick Newman here. If Joe Biden were to become president, do you think he should repeal the Trump tariffs on Chinese imports and basically start over? And if he were to do that, would it be coherent or a smart thing to do to rejoin what's now the new version of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
I think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership wasn't perfect, but I think it was a historic mistake to just pull out without even making an effort to address some of the legitimate concerns about the TPP. Once again, we ceded power and influence to China when we did that. On trade, the big mistake, look, I actually agree with President Trump that we needed to take on the Chinese on trade, but to do it alone while simultaneously sanctioning our European allies in Canada, going after Australia and South Korea was just beyond incompetent. This is a serious fight against a powerful adversary. We have to have our allies on our side. We should be using the World Trade Organization. We should be organizing, if we're going to be imposing sanctions on China, we should be organizing our European and other allies to go in with us. And we can't do that if we are simultaneously going after them. We have to pick the fights.
You're a Biden supporter. You're endorsing Mr. Biden, as has been pointed out. What are you hearing from the campaign about what they will do on day one if he should win to bring about a different policy towards China? Or will it not look different than what we're seeing now?
Day one is only 24 hours, and my list of things Joe Biden has to do on day one would probably take a year, given how much needs to be fixed.
So regarding China.
But in terms of China, look, I would, the best thing we can do to address China is to address our allies first, to repair our broken security and economic alliances with democracies in Asia and Europe. That's what I would do on day one. That is what China fears the most, that we actually start coordinating with our allies again. And having done that, then I think you need to build a coalition against China's unfair trade practices, the structural problems, currency manipulation, for example, the stealing of America's intellectual property. What I hear from the Trump administration is, oh, just please buy some of our American wheat and all is forgiven. I actually would be tougher and hope that Joe Biden would be tougher in insisting on structural changes to Chinese practices, but doing it in coalition with allies so that we can actually be effective.
And of course, we can't really talk about or think about the protests here in the US without kind of drawing the comparison to the demonstrations that we did see in places like Hong Kong. When you think about the turmoil and the sort of conscious uncoupling that's been happening steadily with Hong Kong, what is your stance there? Do you feel as though Hong Kong should be treated as a democratic entity? Should Hong Kong folks be able to come to America and see the US as a place of refuge?
So again, speaking very broadly, and then we'll narrow back down to Hong Kong. If we want to win a contest with the Chinese Communist Party, one of the first things we need to do is to show the world that we are in every way different from the Chinese Communist Party. We don't need tanks and armored personnel carriers and the US military policing dissent on America's streets. Oh my God, does the Chinese Communist Party love to see that, because they get to say we're no different from them. We need to be a shining city on a hill that welcomes refugees from around the world again, just as we did when we were taking on the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And with respect to Hong Kong, the strongest, the toughest thing we can do in support of the protesters in Hong Kong is to say to the Chinese government that if you suffocate Hong Kong, if you crush Hong Kong, we will allow the people of Hong Kong to rebuild their experiment in capitalism and democracy in the United States. We will open our doors to refugees from Hong Kong, to business owners from Hong Kong, to students and talented people from Hong Kong, scientists, engineers, writers. And, I don't think they want to leave Hong Kong. They love it. It's their city. But the knowledge that they have that option may be the most important deterrent that we can put into place against increased Chinese repression there.